Hello and welcome to this episode of Tripology. It's the backpacking show that we all love to listen to on a Tuesday. I'm Alun and I'm here with the ever cartilaginous Adam.
Oh, Alan, that takes me back to my school days. We've got an amazing episode. Thanks ever so much for joining us. Alan's going to be telling us all about the end of his trip where he went through Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. He's been eating some stingrays or something and exploring some caves. And then stick around for the Patreon section because I've got a wicked one this week. I've just come back from a 24-hour rave in a forest.
Can't wait to hear about it over in the Patreon. There's a link in the description. You're cartilaginous this week, Adam, because I'm thinking about stingrays, because that's something that I experienced when I was backpacking around Kuala Lumpur. That's why you're cartilaginous. But today, you might notice on the day that this episode comes out, it's New Year's Eve tomorrow. So hope everyone had a wonderful holiday period. Hope everyone has a wonderful New Year's Eve tomorrow. That means that it's been 2026 years since the birth of Christ, as predicted by John the Baptist, was co-opted by the powers that be to get all pagan worshippers who already celebrated the winter solstice on board with the concept of Christianity. So congratulations to everyone involved.
But far more important, far more influential was the very recent, I'm sure you all celebrated, you listening at home, on the 18th of December, the third birthday of Tripology. Hey!
Very, very cool. Congratulations, Adam. Exactly 3 years ago, on the 18th of December, we pumped out what can only be described as our firstborn, an episode that very few people listened to, but was very beloved to us. And I would like to personally congratulate you.
Well, thank you very much.
He's 3 years old now, that first episode.
3 years old, just a little Tripology toddler. But if it wasn't for that first episode, we wouldn't be here today. So, you know, swings and roundabouts, as they say.
That's true. Yeah, that is definitely true. Go back and have a listen. If you want to hear two people who don't know how to podcast but are very enthusiastic about their own backpacking skills, go and listen to Tripology Takes Off, the genesis, the launch pad by which we've become this beautiful old thing.
The audacity. Have you dared go back and listen to that episode in recent times?
I have, yeah, and it seems to me like two people just desperately trying to prove their credentials. Good evening, I used to backpack for 10 years straight. That kind of thing you can hear.
And me going, exactly, absolutely right, Alan.
Adam, switch your mic on.
What's a microphone?
Yeah, that sort of thing awaits you if you choose to venture back. But now we're 3 years older, we're 3 years wiser, we're 3 years closer to death. And I would like to tell you about what I've been up to the last little bit.
Yeah, please do, because I, much like some of the many viewers, might see the background. Your background, Alan, it's a little bit recognisable. It's familiar even.
Oh, it seems like you might have seen it before and see it every year when I return for my annual visit back to the UK, back to the home of my parents, in order to try and connect familially to take a break from the backpacking that I regularly do. And it is that which leads me to return here, and that which will make up the story of this week's episode, because I did, after finishing up in Brunei, sojourn back to the UK via Kuala Lumpur, and it was an ever so effervescent and wonderful time. Let me tell you about it.
Yeah, nice. I have been to KL before. I was there. I might have been there twice, actually, but not for about 10 years. So looking to see how it's changed, what your experience of the place was like, because I know it is one of Asia's sort of fastest growing, most technologically advanced, and I think most important and most expensive cities.
Yeah, very fast growing. It even grew a little bit whilst I was there. But the story of getting to Kuala Lumpur was where the journey began, because you know I was in Brunei. I had a great time in Brunei. I've declared that you haven't really traveled unless you've been to Brunei. That's my stance on the country. But I headed to the airport kind of early in the morning, only to learn that the flight was ever so delayed. Now, there's an atmosphere in an airport when a flight's been delayed. Everyone's a little bit stressed. We're in the queue to check in via AirAsia. I have slightly too much in my bags, but I think I can probably slip through with a bit of a smile. I basically check in through my bags. The guy, I say, hey, mate, oh, there's a bit of a delay, isn't there? He goes, there is a bit of delay. I put my bag on the scale as if to say, don't sweat. an extra kilo or two here? And he seems to oblige, because I know my bag was more than 7 kilograms. And he went, just don't put any more in that. And he winked at me. And I thought, thank you, sir.
Aha. There is that charm, that charisma, that cartological, what was the word at the beginning again?
Full of cartilage, to be cartilaginous. Yeah. I mean, thank you for noticing. But so I got through security. And there was another guy in the queue who's kind of panicked, and he was going to everyone in the queue and being like, do you know anything about the flight? Is it being cancelled? He was like really on tenterhooks.
Oh dear.
And he was stressing everyone out. I went through to the security area of the airport, and there was a guy there who I can only say had the opposite energy to the stressful guy. He seemed ever so relaxed. He seemed like he was in the know. And he looked at me as if to say, you're also relaxed. And the two of us looked across the security belt at each other like, oh, we make up the relaxed kind of contingent of this airport. And so he looked at me and said, I normally only say this to girls.
Whoa.
But would you like to come to the lounge with me?
Okay.
What do you think of that?
That's a smooth chat-up line.
Yeah.
It's a smooth chat-up line. To say to a guy, I usually only say this to girls.
That's how he started it.
That's amazing.
I didn't know anything about him.
What did you think was coming?
Me. I didn't know what to make of it, Adam, but I said, don't know if you can tell by the fact that the security guard's emptied out my backpack and is currently going through a pile of microphones, but I'm just a lowly podcaster. I cannot afford a lounge.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, don't you worry about that. I'm a frequent flyer. I can get anyone in the lounge gratis, free of charge.
You could have said, I usually only say this to girls, but yes.
So he led me, mate, all the way to the lounge, and he said, hi, I'm an independently wealthy Swede. What's your name?
You said you haven't got any ties to Spotify, have you?
Exactly.
That's amazing. So what do you think it was? It was just your relaxed nature. There was a moment of eye contact. He didn't think this guy needs a lounge experience.
No, I actually think I looked the opposite of haggard. And it wasn't that he was taking pity on me. I think it was that the vibe was so stressed out because the flight was delayed. He sensed in me someone that wasn't going to go to the lounge and be like, when's the plane leaving? What are we going to do? I'm causing an uproar. He sensed in me a beacon of solitude, and he leapt on the opportunity. I said, thank you so much for this. And he went, it's always more fun with a friend. And we sat there and we just chatted in the lounge. I've now got addicted to lounges. It's my first and only lounge experience, but I'm dreading the time where I go to an airport and don't get in a lounge, because there was free food, there was free coffee, there was no alcohol because it's illegal in Brunei, but I was led to believe if it wasn't, then there would be. There was a Swedish guy who was interesting, very interesting man.
Mm-hmm.
Became friends with him. And there was also a Lebanese soccer team all there in the lounge with us, and we had ever such a blast, mate. I'm telling you. Have you ever been to a lounge yourself?
Beirut FC. Have I been to a lounge? I have been to a lounge once. So, I mean, we probably should preface this by saying, there might not be loads of people listening to this show because they're predominantly backpackers or, digital nomads and people that sort of live quite frugally when they travel. There might not be that many people listening to this show who have been in a lounge or have credit cards that allow them access and that sort of stuff. I've always thought, because we do operate in the travel industry and you do see other influencers that are like far bigger than we are, it doesn't take long before they get upgraded to first class and they're putting a reel on Instagram and all this sort of thing. And I've always looked at those and thought,
yeah,
I don't know if I'd do that. I really don't. Unless someone else is paying for it, of course, which in your case they were. So yeah, I can understand how sort of sitting on the corner of a really hard metallic seat for a couple of hours, looking up at the, all the flight board or whatever it's called, and just having to mingle around with all the peasants versus getting loads of free food and drink and hanging out with some wealthy football stars and what have you might be a very literal upgrade.
Very literal. He was an interesting chap as well. He had made it his goal to visit 100 countries, and he was currently in the 90s trying to get up there. That's why he was in Brunei. So
don't listen to my last episode, please.
It was interesting to make his acquaintance. I tried to establish a connection that transcended countries by offering, why don't we get a taxi together out of the airport when we're in Kuala Lumpur, because the city's a long way away from the plane. But once we landed, I just couldn't find him. I got off the plane.
Oh.
I assume he got off the plane before me because he was in business class or whatever. He didn't wait for me, or I got ahead of him somehow and I didn't wait for him. But either which way, one of us didn't wait for the other. I had to get a taxi into Kuala Lumpur on my own.
Oh no, that's where the carry-on hand luggage, the carry-on has actually done you a disservice there, because he's probably got a large suitcase. I know I'm generalising, stereotyping here, and I'm taking a bit of a punt, but I would imagine he's probably got a suitcase that's checked in. He's gone to the bag drop, baggage claim.
Interesting, Adam. I actually don't think I waited for him at baggage claim. That's a good point that you raised. It didn't occur to me that he probably had luggage.
And you with your 8.5 kilos of hand luggage just waltzed on out of there and got a cab thinking, well, I thought he was all right, but maybe not.
There we go. So I'm using this podcast to reach out. If you are an independently wealthy Swede who is kind enough to allow a tripologist into your lounge, thank you very much. And I'm sorry we didn't take a taxi together, but there I was in Kuala Lumpur. I'm looking forward to telling you all about that after this brief interlude.
Many of us go travelling to find ourselves, but what does that really mean?
Yeah, a lot of us go travelling searching for meaning, and while you certainly can find some answers climbing up a mountain or snorkeling in a beautiful reef, sometimes we need some help to even ask the right questions. That's why we've teamed up with BetterHelp in a paid partnership that offers you the chance to try therapy.
You know what it's like, Alan. Moving countries, time zones, jumping around from hostel to hostel, having no schedule. These are reasons travellers often rule out therapy. I've been using the service for 6 months and I've travelled a lot during that time. Organising therapy sessions using the online platform couldn't be easier. I've been working with my therapist on some deep-rooted issues and I'm now in a much happier place.
Yeah, starting therapy with BetterHelp literally couldn't be easier. You simply fill out a questionnaire and you'll be matched with a therapist as soon as possible. It's also easy to switch therapists at any time with no extra cost. BetterHelp strives to pair you with a therapist that's right for you.
With thousands of positive reviews, us included, BetterHelp is a platform you can trust. Click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/Tripology podcast and get 10% off your first month of therapy.
So there we are, Adam. I'm in Kuala Lumpur. What a wonderful city. Nice to see it again. I did note when I was zooming towards the city, that those iconic Petronas towers that all those backpackers know so well, those two silvery skyscrapers that are bought by the oil company featuring a mall within. We all know them. They're iconic, yeah?
I know them very well. I know them. I've even had, I think I went to a pop-up bar on a helipad when I was there, and they were sort of in the distance. I took very famous. I mean, it's one of my favourite photos that I took when I was travelling, of some Nike shoes, some knockoff Nike shoes that I got from a tiny shop in Vietnam. And, like all the people do where they cross their legs or whatever, and they've just got their shoes in the shot with the Petronas towers in the background. Anyway, that's a different story for a different day. You were filled up to the brim with free food and you were out and about walking around KL.
Yeah, saw those Petronas towers. Nice to see them again. I think that the city itself has built up quite a way. And that now, where the Petronas Towers, in my memory, used to stand bold, lonesome in the skyline. Now there's quite a lot of things that are almost as tall as them all around them. So that was quite interesting to see the development, because it has, of course, been a decade since I was in KL. It was one of the, first 5 cities I went to whilst traveling back in 2015. So it's been ever such a long time since I was there.
Yeah, you will have seen this because you also have access to the same Instagram and email accounts that I do. But whenever someone says to us, I've got 6 months to play with or a year to play with, and I don't really know where I want to go. I'm happy to go to South America, Central America, or maybe Asia. What would your advice be? I often reply by saying, go to places that are developing more quickly if you want to see them as they are now, because Europe and North America 5 years ago and in 5 years, probably more or less going to be the same. But Asia, South America and Africa in particular are developing at a rapid rate. So even if you go to some cities in, a difference of sort of 6 months, you will notice the difference. So I've got no doubt that they are developing at a very, very fast rate. I do like KL a lot, and I know that it is quickly becoming one of Asia's most important cities.
Yeah, and it will never be, as it once was, more than it is now. So get yourself over there if you want to see it in its prime. I won't go on and on about the stuff I did in KL because a lot of it, they're backpacking standards without so much of a story to tell. I went to the Batu Caves, of course, a very important Hindu site where you climb a lot of steps and watch tourists get mugged by monkeys as you go up to get some Hinduistic spiritualism. I went to Bukit Gesing, which is a forest reserve in the middle of Kuala Lumpur. It's carved out, a bit of old jungle that you can walk around, hike around and see. Most significantly, Adam, I was able to meet up with the first ever person I met whilst traveling. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy, a Malaysian native, and I met him. He was a teacher at the school that I taught in Yangshuo. So I basically got off a plane 2015, went all the way to Yangshuo, crashed out, went to sleep, and in the morning I woke up and had breakfast with this gentleman. I'd not seen him since I was last in KL. It was such a joy to meet up with him. I went and got food with him. I ended up going back to his place and having dinner with his family. To see someone that you've not seen in a decade and for it to be so much like no time has passed really solidified for me the best thing about travel, which is the connections that you make with people, and to just be happy for each other. He's doing really well. He was talking about his life that's obviously changed a lot in the last 10 years. We've not stayed in touch online, really. I just hit him up because I happened to be in town. What a joy. What a joy. And it made me eternally grateful, not just for travel, but also for modern technology, which allows you to re-enter people's lives and revisit old friendships like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really not surprising that it was completely effortless. That, you just sunk back into the same way that I guess you guys were when you were together. How much time beforehand did you let him know? I imagine he welcomed you with open arms, but what a wicked sort of full circle moment you were able to experience with him.
Yeah, because it had been so long, I didn't know whether he was even in KL anymore, and I really just sort of a few days before I went to KL, shot a message saying, hey, by any chance, are you still in Kuala Lumpur? Because I'm going to be there and I would love to see you. And he actually hadn't been living in KL, but just so happened to be back for that month. So it was really perfect, and just a testament to how open and cool everyone is and how much everyone wants to see each other, and how easy it is with modern technology to get back into people's lives.
Yeah, did you end up doing a little tour together at all? Did he sort of show you around, go out and eat some food together or something along those lines?
Yeah, he was working really hard, so we didn't spend a whole bunch of time together, but he did show me some places that would be quite difficult to find or order from if you weren't from KL. You know, the kind of places where you sort of go, it's a bit on a back street, you raise a hand and do some gestures and they bring you exactly what you've waved at and ordered. And I think that it was probably the best food I've had in Kuala Lumpur. It was actually just like catfish and some vegetables and a little sort of milky dessert, the name of which I can't recall, but it was very delicious.
That's amazing, mate. That's so amazing. I mean, I imagine that sort of changed your entire trip. I mean, it gave your time in KL completely different meaning. I imagine it was the highlight.
Totally. I was there in KL because KL afforded me an easy flight back to London. And to have flown straight from Borneo was going to be more expensive. So why not go via KL? But it was totally worth it to see my friend. And I think that was such a wonderful thing. I was really happy. One food that I can remember the details of that I had was on Jalan Alor. Now, what can you tell me about Jalan Alor, being the beautiful, sexually attractive foodie that you are?
Absolutely nothing, mate. Absolutely nothing at all. Jalan Alor. I mean, is that sort of Chinatown? Is that the main sort of night market food area?
It's the main night market food area, mate. Yeah, it's a long stretch of road through Kuala Lumpur where all the food stalls are.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I probably didn't do KL justice when I was there. I can't remember how long I was there for. It would have been at least 3 or 4 days because I met up with 2 different groups of friends. But I didn't even do the Batu Caves, mate. So I know that I went to the area that you've spoken about, but yeah, I can't remember. There's one food experience I remember in KL, and it was at, I believe, a Buddhist temple that has sort of an outdoor food court. And it's one of those places where you pay a sort of standard amount of money. There's loads of different food stalls around the outside. Loads of people that work in KL, in the offices, in the business centre, they'll go there of an afternoon, take a tray, and then you kind of point at what you want and just load it up, and then you just pay for whatever you've taken at the end. But it was exceptional. I really do remember that food experience fondly. But I am very excited to hear what on earth you had, because we did tease it at the beginning.
Yeah, well, it's the most famous thing you can have in Jalan Alor, and I'd gone to Jalan Alor on a couple of different occasions and tried to persuade the people I was with to have this with me, but they wouldn't. So on my very final night in KL, I took a cab specifically in the pouring rain to get to Jalan Alor to have this thing so that we could talk about it on the podcast. Adam, would you do me the honour of lending me your food item so that I can talk about this thing with sufficient detail?
Oh, with pleasure, mate, with pleasure. It's rice for breakfast.
Rice for breakfast? You can't have rice for breakfast.
Oh my goodness, I feel so unusual being on this side of that beautiful breakfast-based rice dish, but thank you so much for lending it to me just briefly. I'm not going to do it justice because you know so much more about food than I do, but this thing really was one of the more unique things I'd ever eaten. It is, of course, Stingray. Now, you know me, animal lover, but I can't forget what those crazy little guys did to hero Steve Irwin. So I felt a little bit justified in just having a try of one.
I think that's absolutely fine reasoning, mate. And yeah, I mean, this is a message to anyone who doesn't eat weird and wonderful things when they're abroad. I think it just comes from discomfort, doesn't it? Because, you know, if something is a food, I've always said,
Yeah.
if a people or a culture eat something, therefore it is a food. And more often than not, if you're not comfortable with eating something, that's just because of the culture that you come from doesn't eat it regularly. So, I mean, by that measure, if you are interested in food and food culture, just be open to it. I know it's easier said than done, but a stingray is definitely something I would try.
I have to say, on 2 occasions, I was on Jalan Alor with divemasters, and both of them, unprompted, when said, "Would you like to have a stingray?" said, "No, I can't. I'm a dive master," and then went on to eat fish. I don't understand. But clearly, there's some, I mean, that was linearly spoken by the 2 dive masters that I ate with, and who am I to argue? They are dive masters. So, Adam, I ordered a stingray cooked in banana leaf, and it came to the table, a sort of quarter of a stingray. I would say, if I had to guess, probably the upper quarter of the right wingspan.
Okay, I'm with you.
Is that how you do rice for breakfast?
That's fine. It's important details.
It was served up with a side of garlic rice and a spicy little sauce that can only be described as red in hue. The stingray itself was one of the most unusual fishes, if we can call it that I've ever had. It was silky in texture, much like a catfish, but it came away from the bone in sort of strips lined out. Now, I'll put a picture up on the screen for those of us listening to the video podcast, or indeed on YouTube, link in the description. Quite unlike the flesh of any fish that I've ever eaten before. It really, I mean, almost looked like Play-Doh.
Oh.
That had been through one of those machines that stripes it out as it goes all flat and long, if that's a reference that we all get.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that people are shouting down their headphones. Someone say Stingray, but you mean something along those lines, like a cheese string that
Absolutely. Yeah.
weird, really, really strange. Quite sort of flaky though.
Flaky, yes. Flaky, silky, stringy, and mounted on a latticed cartilaginous bone structure.
Wow.
Yes, Adam, it was really quite incredible. Fans of the show will notice that my food reviews are much more based in feelings than facts about the food. I don't even want to tell you what it tasted like, but that whole thing, baby, was mounted on a bone board that was crisscross in nature, and I've never seen anything like it.
So its skeletal structure was crisscross. Was as you described, like lettuce.
Absolutely.
That is crazy.
Yes, latticey, crisscross. So there's like a hard bone surface, and then all the flesh sits on top of that, cooked in a banana leaf.
My God. Are we going to hear roughly what it tastes like? Was it quite fishy? Because I can describe to you what whale is like. We've just lost a load of dive masters, I'm sure. But is it?
Yeah, you shouldn't have eaten that, mate.
Is it sort of subtly salty? Does it taste a bit like the sea?
No, it doesn't taste like the sea. It tastes like a very delicate fish. I would say the texture was even softer than your average fish, not chickeny at all.
Weird.
And melt in the mouth, some would say.
Right. Is it popular? Did you see lots of other people eating it?
On Jalan Alor, it's the most popular thing. And if you were to ask a restaurateur on Jalan Alor, is there anything you'd recommend? They would say Stingray. I asked several times, and that was always the answer. It was also one of the more expensive things on the menu.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm really glad that you ate it. And I mean, if this isn't an example of why you should try things that are maybe a little bit sort of adventurous, as people say, because it is one of the best things you've eaten in a very long time. Extremely interesting and something that is of the city you're in. So good on you.
Yeah, genuinely one of those meals that I came away from thinking, oh, I've never had anything like that.
And it was good.
And it was good, yeah. And I think that kind of if food is one branch, cuisine is a branch of art. Art should make you feel something, and that made me feel something positive. Like it was like, not only was that like a good meal, but I was very in touch with it, you know? There was no getting away from the fact it was a stingray, and it looked and tasted and felt very unique and unlike the things that I've become accustomed to eating. So it kind of jarred me in some way.
Yeah.
And I think that was cool of it. That was artistic.
Yeah. I mean, at the risk of sounding probably quite opinionated on the matter, I do think that even objectively, food and food culture is such an enormous part of travel. It forms such a huge part of travel. Whether you're interested in food or not, or whatever your food preferences are, is not really the point. But in order to experience some parts of culture and travel, eating is a massive part of getting to the bottom of certain communities or experiences. So, yeah, I do fear that there are lots of people out there that, I'm not necessarily saying you have to eat a stingray if you see one, but you sort of get my point, is that eating what the locals eat and eating what the locals eat, where and how they eat them, can completely change your trip and give you a wildly different experience.
Totally. I had a very good time in Kuala Lumpur. I was very glad to be back. It was interesting being back in a place as someone different. I'm a very different man than I was 10 years ago, as is everyone who spent another decade on a planet. But it was interesting to go back to somewhere where I was so green the last time I was there, and to now be me, having done all the travels I've been, but be back in that city, see that guy who was one of the first people I met traveling. It was quite a spiritual experience in some ways, without getting too pretentious and la-di-da about it. It was a real kind of full circle coming of age moment, and I was very, very glad to have it. There's a lot more stories to tell about my journey home. There was a crazy experience on the plane back to London that I can't wait to tell you all about. And in London, I got to meet someone very, very special to me, and there's a whole beautiful narrative about that we'll hear in a future week's episode. No tale of a trip this week, Adam, because we're already at time. It's a Christmas holiday period, and I think that Tales of a Trip is going to be good to visit and have on the show as often as we want to do. But if we've got crazy stories to tell, maybe there'll be some weeks where we don't put Tales of a Trip in. Tell us what you think. There's a link in the description if you want to submit your greatest travel story, though. Now we should go to the Patreon, shouldn't we?
We should. We're going to go to the Lost and Found section. I will leave another link in the description where I'm going to tell you all about why I'm looking so dishevelled. 24 hours party in the forest. Don't mind if I do. We'll see you next time.
We'll see you there. Bye.